Animal Farm. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Connor Reeds here, and we're going to be going through Animal Farm by George Orwell today. As always, I'm going to start off with a quote, and the quote is, "All animals are equal, some animals are just more equal," which is a quote which comes from the book, obviously, and it's said, I believe, by Napoleon, who is one of the big characters of this book, right at the end when it becomes very clear that it's a totalitarian regime on the farm, which sounds really intense, but on the face of things, this book is very simple, very fun to read. So let's jump into the summary. So what is it all about? It's a really simple book, actually. It is a book about Manor Farm and all the animals on Manor Farm. And you have all the animals you'd expect to have on a farm in England during 1945. You have pigs, you have sheep, you have dogs, you also have cows, you have horses, you have some rabbits, you have a little chickens, you have a little bit of everything. And the overall premise of the book is that these animals are sick and tired of working so hard on the farm, being the producers, and not receiving the biggest cut or even an equal cut of the spoils of working on this farm. The person who obviously receives the biggest cut is the farmer and his wife, and the farmer for this book is called Mr. Jones, which is a great British name from the era. A little bit about the author, George Orwell. I've reviewed one of his other books, 1984, which is here behind me, and one thing that I love about George Orwell is he's a fantastic educator. This book has a bunch of layers to it. The most basic layer is it's a fun farmyard animal story for anybody to read, but the more you look into the book, the more you realize it's actually a metaphor and an easy way of educating people without it being too wordy, too difficult, with too many names to remember, of the Russian Revolution. And if 1984 is like an example of what totalitarian and authoritarian regime would look like when it's fully formed and in its height and in its capacity and it's been fleshed out, Animal Farm is the example of how we get there, but I'll talk a little bit more about that further down the line. So how does the story begin? We start with one of the old pigs, and the pig is called Old Major. Now, Old Major actually represents Karl Marx, who is dubbed the father of communism. And at the start of the book, Old Major calls all the animals around, all the animals of Mr. Jones's farm, and he is dying. He's going to die real soon, and he essentially lays out this vision, this goal, this idea that the animals can run the farm themselves, and they can dish out all the spoils of running the farm without having Mr. Jones take the cut, without doing any of the work. Obviously, this really excites all the animals. They all get behind him. It's very exciting, and it creates that vision. And obviously, you need a vision, you need a goal for any kind of change to happen, whether it's for better or for worse. You need a vision. You need people to be excited about a different way of doing things, a new way of doing things, or just something that we're going to change about the current system. And that is what Old Major represents. He represents Karl Marx, who I believe, don't crucify me if I'm wrong, did write the Communist Manifesto, and really outlined communism, and hence the name, the father of communism. So having said that they're going to go and do this, the animals do band together, and they manage to kick Mr. Jones directly off of his own farm, which is really exciting. They do it without too much trouble, and this really goes to show the revolution in Russia. So that is what that is epitomizing, and that's what that is a metaphor for as well. Now, once they've overthrown this the farmer, Mr. Jones, from Manor Farm, they decide to install something called Animalism, which is obviously, what is supposed to be communism from the book, and they lay out 7 key rules for the animals to follow. Guys, the rules are really simple. The first one is whatever goes on 4 legs or has wings is a friend. Whatever goes on 2 legs is an enemy, obviously referring to humans. And then there is a lot of rules based around preventing the animals from becoming human-like and essentially putting the same reign, totalitarian, authoritarian reign that the humans were running on the animals. So there's a bunch of rules to make sure none of them step into that role. So those rules would be, for example, no animal shall sleep in a bed, no animal shall wear clothes, and no animal shall drink alcohol. Rule number 6 is that no animal shall kill another animal. And with the final rule is all animals are equal. And that probably sounds very similar to what I said at the start, the quote that I came with. And the reason for that is because those are very closely interlinked, but interestingly enough, their meanings completely change, and that is done over the course of the book. Once Mr. Jones is overthrown, the animals decide that they are going to get together and they are going to debate and vote on every single decision for anything that's going to happen on the farm, which is a great system. It's extremely democratic. Sorry. However, some of the animals seem to be a bit smarter or are more educated previously, or just seem to understand how to communicate much better than others. And what Orwell does is he really assigns each character or each animal type to somebody from this Russian Revolution. And it's interesting because I was essentially Googling while I was reading the book, like, who does this person represent? Who does this represent? Because I am interested in politics. But what was cool is that if I wasn't, I could just enjoy the book as a farm animal uprising without going any deeper. So it is fun to see the layers he's put into it. It quickly emerges that the pigs are well educated and they're great speakers, and although every animal gets a vote on the decisions, there's two pigs that really take the lead when it comes to suggesting ideas, running the debates, and being the voice of the people. So really they take leadership roles. You have one pig who's named Snowball, and he's going to represent Trotsky from the Russian Revolution. And then you have the other pig called Napoleon, who's actually going to represent Stalin. And these two, although they are the smartest or most educated or really the most confident on the farm, one thing that is for certain is that they are going to butt heads on every single issue. So it really creates like two different parties essentially, which is exactly what happened in the Russian Revolution. Now, I'm not going to go too much further into the plot because I would like you guys to read the book and I don't want to ruin it for you, but I am going to give you who some of the other characters are and who their relation would be in the Russian Revolution, so you can get an idea of how all-encompassing and intelligent really this book was without being super direct. So there is a third pig called Squeaker. Now Squeaker, it's actually debated. I couldn't get like a definitive 100% answer as to who Squeaker represents. But what Squeaker's role is in the book is he essentially communicates the pig's idea, Napoleon's idea, Stalin's ideas to everybody else on the farm very effectively, very coercively, and really in a way that is essentially just propaganda. Now, the two different representatives I got of Squeaker was, one is Molotov, who is a person who spearheaded and really masterminded Stalin's propaganda campaign, and the other representative that I saw here and there was Pravda. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but Pravda was a magazine or publication or newspaper that was used to get the propaganda out to the masses and was really taken as gospel. And I suppose, it's interchangeable. It doesn't really change the story much depending on who you believe that represents. It essentially has the same function. So we also have Boxer, who is this huge cart horse. Boxer is capable of feats of strength and a lot of work that nobody else on the farm can get done. And he's strong even for a big horse. It's said that he is worth 3 different horses. And he has a great arc. It's a little heartbreaking near the end, but he's a great character. And most of the accounts that I found said that Boxer would represent the peasants and the lower classes of the Russian Revolution, who were really stuck with the brunt of the work and without much information, and was really bought into the propaganda machine. And there are tons of characters. I'm not going to go through every single one because I don't want the video to get super long, but the dogs. So there are 9 dogs that Napoleon really trains and raises from birth. Now, these dogs are quite vicious. They're fed a lot as they are growing up, so they grow to be really big, and they only listen to Napoleon, who is Stalin. So the dogs represent the secret police and essentially the military of Russia, and how important it is to have these on your side if you would like to disperse a message without anybody really having an opinion back or even having the guts to come back at you. Because, well, in the book it's 9 big scary dogs, which is scary for almost any animal, and in real life it's secret police and the military, which is scary for the everyday person as well. And these were a huge influence throughout the book. Those are all the characters that I'm going to explain to you now, but again, if you're interested, just pick up the book and you'll be able to read through, and every time you found a character that you don't know the direct representative for, then you can just jump on Google and find out yourself. I had a great time doing this and I felt educated throughout the book as well. So through the book, we essentially follow how Manor Farm turns to Animal Farm, and it starts out with all these great communist ideals that it's supposed to keep everybody equal and an equal share, and it actually does start like that. It starts out pretty successfully, and then we see how that goes from there to a more authoritarian and totalitarian, essentially dictatorship throughout the course of the book. Now, like I touched on a little bit earlier, I've read 1984 before, and you don't have to have read that to read this one. In fact, you could read this one first and then read that one, and it would make just as much sense. But I think 1984 was Orwell's warning of how bleak, controlled, and essentially just joyless and lifeless it would be living in a fully grown, fully fledged totalitarian regime where everything is being listened to. They have all of the power, and you're really just being born into this system where they control everything. What Animal Farm does is it really educates as to how that can come about. So I remember reading 1984 and I was like, this is terrible, but there's no way this would happen in real life. But what we come to realize, and what I come to realize, is that although humans individually can be very, very intelligent, we are all really just brains, and brains do have some shortcuts that it takes that aren't that useful for us, and it also has big gaps in its effectiveness. And over thousands of years, I suppose, politics has figured out how to make use of those gaps and to convince humans of things that maybe aren't. And it's a without going into any more detail, it's a great example of how we can go from a great element of freedom to not so much in increments, whereas it doesn't feel like that is happening. Some of the things that we get to see in this book in a farmyard setting that is also in a political setting sometimes is we get to see a really, really effective use of propaganda. Honestly, we get to see a really effective use of educated people taking advantage of uneducated people, because some of the animals can read and write and some can't. Obviously, that's not the same in today's world, but there are different levels of education and understanding as to how things are and how things aren't. We also get to see a really, really effective use of intimidation, really effective use of controlling the means of production, really effective use of tons of different political ways of taking power, and some of them we sometimes see in today. So really effective use of creating an us versus them, which is really useful for anybody who wants to democratically take power and then turn that into something that is more of a dictatorship. We also see, what else do we see? Those are the main ones that come to mind right now. So also great for a political education. But overall, my recommendations, I'm going to give it an 8.7, which is really, really high. The reason for that is because I love this author. Of the small amount that I've read from him, he makes topics that I believed were going to be really, really dry and really difficult to get through super entertaining, super fun. It helps you build a connection with the characters and get emotionally involved in it as well, and really engross yourself in what that would be like. And I think that does two things. Number one, it makes it a fun story, but number two, it does definitely serve as a warning and gives you opportunity to see that happening in the world around you. And I think that was Orwell's goal. Well, I know that was his goal because he says it often, but the goal of this book and this one is essentially to ensure that people are educated and they can see that coming. That's because Orwell lived through World War II and was a part of the Spanish Revolution and Civil War, and he saw how this type of thing can happen firsthand. So he wanted to give a warning, but in a way that wasn't going to have his book banned and taken off of shelves and not read by people due to the fact that it was very political. So he kind of did it in an Aesop's fables way, which you have to admire. And that's everything. Super quick review of Animal Farm. If it sounds like the type of thing that you would like to read, and I think it should be for everybody, go and pick it up. It's actually a really short book as well. That's my only trope with it that I wasn't too happy with. It's less than 150 pages. So I kind of wish it lasted a little bit longer, but I suppose the reason why it is so successful and is still a classic is that it doesn't. It's not tough to get through. You find yourself flying through it, and it will definitely be something I reread over and over again. Thank you so much for listening to me today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and like and subscribe if you have enjoyed this. Have a good one.